Hello, welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. So today I'm back with a discussion full of spoilers, just getting that out of the way, of the last two books in the Landry series by V.C. Andrews, or should I say V.C. Andrews' Landry series written by Andrew Neiderman. So I finished these two books. The last two books are Hidden Jewel and Tarnish Gold, which I will discuss in a minute. But before we get there, I did want to mention that I put together, for the first time in a while, an October TBR. So why I did this is I decided to put V.C. Andrews down just for a little while, for the month, and read some more extreme horror. Let's just put it that way. Now, when I say extreme horror, I take it with a grain of salt because I am not a big fan of extreme horror. I don't gravitate toward it, either in films or literature. So I found that when I do read extreme horror or like splatterpunk, it either evokes in me like I get the giggles at how silly it is, or that could be a defense mechanism, just saying, or it gives me a sense of existential dread, which is an experience that I don't really crave. So I think that's why I've always been kind of squeamish when it comes to extreme horror. However, I have an open mind to it, if that makes sense. So this month, I'm going to read a few books that have been on my shelf. I'm not buying anything new. These are ones I've had for a while that either have a reputation or appear to be, from what I've heard, more on the more extreme side. So the first book is something I've already started reading. And yes, I can attest already it is quite extreme and pretty out of control. And that is Flesh Gothic by Edward Lee. I found this in a thrift store along with Infernal Angel. So far, this book it really starts off with a bang. Literally an orgy from hell. And I'm actually really enjoying this Baroque story. And I like the way the author writes. So this is my first time into Edward Lee. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this author. So I'm going to read these two off the bat. So I am just recently back on a full-time working schedule, so it's really changed my whole day. I'm no longer a lady of leisure. So I don't know how much reading I'm going to get done with everything else I'm planning for October, but I'll show you what else I have on my list. This is called House of Pain by Sèphera Girón. This is a leisure book. She actually has a booktube channel that I check out every once in a while. I think this is pretty extreme. I'm going to check it out. And I also like to support ladies who write horror fiction, especially ladies who write extreme horror fiction. And speaking of which, I have a feeling this one is pretty extreme too. This is The Cipher by Kathe Koja. I've heard a lot about this book from Alex over at the Bookubus. Finally got a copy of it, so I'm also going to read this. And then if I have time, this is a book I found recently, and it looks like it might be an indie book, Feral by James DeMonaco and B.K. Evenson. I think anything with the title of Feral, I'm going to expect something more graphic. So those are my picks for the month of October. I'll try to read as much as I can. If you have any suggestions that you think, I have to read, put them in the comments below. Anyway, moving on to the main event. And I'm going to do both of these books in one sitting because I'm kind of anxious to wrap it up. And also because I just found this book to be not that much to discuss. I've just found like in these V.C. Andrews series, book 4 is usually the dullest book. For some reason, this was no exception. So it has a really cool cover. I think the problem maybe I have with this book, and it's not that I didn't enjoy it, I did, but why it didn't quite measure up to the others is because I found Pearl to be kind of a dull character. So she starts off, this is Ruby and Beau's daughter. She's all grown up, she's about to graduate from high school. She's kind of having some difficulty with her peers because they're pressuring her, at the beginning of the book, her boyfriend is pressuring her to have sex and she doesn't want to. And he, is like, you're a prude and all, that typical kind of thing, but she sticks to her guns. She wants to become a doctor. So she gets a job in like a hospital as like a candy striper, something like that. And immediately, these books, it's just every male character is just out to be a sleaze in every one of these books. I think that's another reason why I need a break from V.C. Andrews. It just got to be too much. But she meets this young intern, and he is, trying to get into her pants, basically, by in this really kind of hilarious, ridiculous scene where he's going to, he brings her to his pad, his den of seduction, I guess you could say, and he tries to monitor her bodily responses by, touching her, and, when I nibble on your ear, what does that do to your bodily response? What if my hands travel down to here? What happens? It's like that kind of thing. She at least trusts her instincts and, tells him to get lost, but she's confused. She's confused about her sexuality, and she doesn't want to give it away until she was really in love. So she's actually kind of just like a nice, sensible girl. Ruby, on the other hand, has been going through some changes. She's a middle-aged lady now. Now in the TV movie, the actress playing Ruby is so youthful looking. I mean, even if they try to add a little bit of like crow's feet, she still looks totally gorgeous, and she looks like she could be the actress playing her daughter's sister. Just saying. The age makeup, and on Beau too, they gray his hair a little bit. There's one scene that's shot outdoors where you can actually see like the makeup lines. It looks like when I was a kid and trying to look old in a Halloween costume. Of course, now I can just like let it be. But at the time, you're adding like the crow's feet with the black pen. It kind of looks like that. That film, Hidden Jewel, of all of the V.C. Andrews series of the Lifetime films that I watched, was the worst film and the cheapest looking. For example, a lot of the story takes place in the bayou and on these canals where they're boating through this canal, paddling through. That's a big part of the atmosphere. The Spanish moss hanging down. It's so cheap that they really didn't shoot, as I can recall. Maybe they had some like drone shots, but they didn't have any scenes on the water, and it just felt cheap. So everything seems to be going pretty well with the family. The two boys, Pierre and Jean, are, growing up, and Ruby and Beau are happy. Ruby's doing her artwork. So Ruby gets a message that Nina is dying. Nina is the old cook with the voodoo spells who gave her the charms and all the stuff. She is the one who brought Ruby to Mama Didi, and they put the spell on Giselle. So Ruby has a lot of baggage about her past, not only with Giselle, but also with Paul and everything that she's done. So Nina has a deathbed message for Ruby, but Ruby doesn't get there in time. So Ruby's very stressed out about this. She's feeling very guilty and really saddened that she wasn't able to get to Nina in time to be there when she died and to receive this message. And she knows now that bad things are going to come. She sees this as a really bad omen, and it is, because when they're out in the country, in the bayou, there's her son, Jean, gets bitten by a snake and dies. Pierre, the other son, the other twin, has a reaction to seeing his brother killed and goes into like a coma, but it's all psychosomatic. So in order to bring him back, the doctors are saying, well, the mother has to be there. He wants to die and be with his brother. Ruby really needs to be there. But instead, she runs off back to the bayou and gets with Mama Didi, and they start doing all kinds of like voodoo and spells to try to release sins of the past. She has to reckon with what she did to Giselle and also to Paul. So this is where Ruby is. And this part of the story I really enjoyed. I thought it was great for Ruby to finally have to kind of confront what she did. So Pearl uses her knowledge of medicine, or interest in medicine, to try to help her brother come out of his coma. And she knows that in order to do that, he really needs his mother. So she goes to the bayou to look for Ruby. So in typical V.C. Andrews fashion, the male character just completely caves in and just becomes a drunk and a mess, and Beau just kind of loses it. He's really useless. So Ruby's missing, and Pearl has to kind of take on the responsibility to find Ruby, to help her brother, because her father is kind of useless. So her journey is one of like growing up. So while Pearl is in the bayou looking for Ruby, she meets this young man, strapping young buck named Jack. And it's like an instant attraction. He works on the oil rig that belonged to Paul. And she, starts to get to know him. They spend the night in Cypress Woods, which is now like dilapidated. Okay, so this romance is blossoming, but he, because he's a working man, has to go to work. And while he's gone, guess who shows up? Old Buster. Now, Buster, because gossip spreads in this part of the bayou, so Buster comes up to Pearl's in the shack, and says, I know where your mom is at. Just get in my boat and I'll take you to her. Now, Pearl, being, naive, does so. And of course, once Buster gets her back to his old shack, he, again, wants his debt paid, because it's like, well, if I can't have your mama, I'll settle for you. And tries to chain her up the way he did with Ruby. But luckily, she's able to fight him off and without too much damage. And she goes back to Jack. And things kind of progress from there. All kind of gets resolved. Ruby makes peace with Paul through her voodoo rituals and sets his spirit free. The same with Giselle. And she goes back to New Orleans, and Pierre comes out of his coma. The book does have a happy ending with Pearl getting together with Jack, and he rebuilds the shack to make it really beautiful, and she decides that Pearl, wants to be in the bayou with him. So the story ends up coming full circle with Pearl ending up back in the shack from where she was born. So overall, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the movie, but it wasn't my favorite in the series. It was a little, it kind of rambled a little bit, but I was glad I read it, of course. I love all of these books. Okay, so the fifth and final story in this series is Tarnish Gold. So in typical fashion, this is a prequel story. So we go and learn about Graham Mear's life and her daughter, and her life with old Jack, but he's kind of young in this one, and their daughter, Gabrielle, who is the mother of Paul, Tate, and Ruby and Giselle. This story really moved me. I was seriously sobbing at the end of it. I was so moved by it. It was so sad. It was a really, really sad story, and actually beautifully written. I mean, I think that this could even be a standalone novel. Andrew Neiderman seems to save some really beautiful writing for the final book in the series. Now, I don't know why. This is just something I observed. Might just be my opinion, but this one is just, it's lovely. It's really lovely. It's a beautiful, sad story, and a really beautiful character development in Gabrielle. Gabrielle is a child of nature. She is somebody who just spends her day in the swamps, communing with nature. I actually related a lot to this character, I have to say, because I grew up in nature and feel that way, where I don't always fit in with people and want to be around nature and animals. And I think this is one reason why this story moved me so much. So in the story, Gabrielle is just sunning herself one day in the nude, but not trying to be provocative, just because she is this child of nature and she just wants to be one with the swamp. And Octavius Tate comes paddling up and ends up attacking her and raping her. She gets pregnant with Paul. Now, she doesn't tell anyone. It's not like she's going to have him arrested. And that's another thing that's very frustrating about this story. Of course, it's taking place like in the 1940s. So yes, it's a different world. No one would have believed this poor Cajun girl. I don't even know if they would have believed her now. You have to think about these things like, well, why didn't she go to the police? Well, what is she going to do? The Tates own the police in this community. So Gabrielle finally confesses to Graham Mear. I'm just going to call her Graham Mear because that's how I think of this character, her mother, about what happened. And old Jack is mad. So he shows up at the Octavius house and tries to bargain with, blackmail them about this knowledge that Gabrielle's pregnant with Octavius's child. So somehow they come up with a plan. Gladys, the wife, who has no children, decides that she's going to, we've seen this before in V.C. Andrews, she's going to pretend that the baby's hers So she's going to keep Gabrielle in her mansion in the attic. We're back in the attic for the 9 months it takes for her to have this baby, or probably 8 months at this point. Take the baby as hers, and then Gabrielle can just go back to the shack and she won't be ruined because no one will know. So she'll have a chance to, for another man to marry her. She doesn't care about any of this. This is what I like about this character too. She's in her own fantasy world a lot of the times. It's a beautiful, beautiful character. But she goes along with this plan. Granmere goes along with this plan. And of course, Jack just wants the money, but he's going to gamble it away in one night anyway. So it's just like the destruction in this plan is just so frustrating. There's never even a chance that Gabrielle can say, no, this plan is not going to work for me. I don't want to be in this attic for 8 months. Plus Gladys is weird, and it gets even weirder. Now in the picture here, we see little Gabrielle pregnant with all these creepy dolls. The creepy dolls are part of the attic. So we definitely get some shades of flowers in the attic here. What is really disturbing about these dolls, though, is that they're Gladys's childhood dolls, and where the genitals would be on the dolls, that area is all mutilated. So if you see a child doing that kind of thing to their dolls, something's wrong. And there definitely was something wrong. Gladys's father molested her. So that's why she can't, she freezes during sex. It's not really her fault that she's so crazy. But what she does to Gabrielle is really unforgivable. It's like straight out of The Handmaid's Tale. She starts acting like she's pregnant. She, pads her belly, but not just that. She's wants Gabrielle to tell her everything. Like when Gabrielle gets morning sickness, Gladys will start getting sick, like she's having an hysterical pregnancy. And of course, Octavius is just kind of skulking around. He actually tries again to have sex with Gabrielle. He's such a creep. Comes up to the attic now that you're pregnant, can't we fool around? And she's just like, no, get out. So Gabrielle gives birth to Paul. And while she's giving birth, like I said, it's out of The Handmaid's Tale, where Gladys is going through the whole process and screaming, pretending like she's giving birth. And Octavius is like, okay, this is weird. The whole scene is weird. Granmere is there too, helping with the birth. Of course, she's the the midwife. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And Paul is born. Gladys takes Paul. Poor Gabrielle is sent back to the shack. So it's like she's left with nothing. There's in this book, a great dynamic between Granmere and Jack, the married couple. It shows it's a very realistic look at this relationship, where Granmere definitely kind of has a soft side for Jack, but it erodes during the course of this book because of how horrible he is. Every male character in this book is just awful. So things are not going very well for Gabrielle. It gets even worse when Jack, her father, starts to do these hunting tours of rich Creole people from New Orleans coming in to slum it in the bayou and hunt. And Catherine, the mother, Granmere, makes them very welcome and cooks for them and stuff. So they start making a little money this way. But guess who Gabrielle meets in one of these hunting parties? That's right, Pierre Dumas. Pierre Dumas, the handsome Pierre Dumas from the wealthy family. He is married to Daphne, but she is not able to have children. Just a little side note. We know these characters, and we sort of know what's going to happen now. Gabrielle and Pierre fall in love, although he does take advantage of her, in my opinion. He doesn't force himself on her the way Octavius did. So whatever kind of resistance that Gabrielle puts up in this relationship, she is kind of doomed to go forward with it. And Pierre sets up this little love nest shack for them. So they have this beautiful, idyllic existence for a while, until she gets pregnant, of course. Then he kind of disappears. And again, another man acting horribly. Daphne shows up in her limousine in the bayou, pulls up in front of the shack, and makes Gabrielle an offer. She says, I know about you and my husband. tell you what, I can't have children. Let's take your child again. Now, this plot device seems to be getting a little old. We've seen this many times. And this seems to be Gabrielle's only purpose in this world, is to have these babies that other people buy. Of course, we've seen this before in other V.C. Andrews stories. So Gabrielle agrees to it. Of course, Jack wants the money. Catherine is, I guess, she goes along with it. She's very depressed now. Very depressed. And she and Jack things have gotten worse between them because, you know, she just can't take it anymore that he's like selling off their babies. And the book ends where Ruby and Giselle's story begins, with Gabrielle giving birth to the twins. The first baby is Giselle. Jack takes the baby and to sell her off to the Dumas family. And Grandmere has one more ace up her sleeve because she knew that Gabrielle was having twins, didn't tell Jack. So Ruby is born, but instead of Gabrielle finally having her baby, she dies in childbirth. And it's a really sad ending, and I'm just going to read a little bit at the end to you. So as she's slowly dying, bleeding to death after giving birth to the twins, this is how the series ends. There, just ahead, his shoulders gleaming in the sunlight, was my mythical lover. As I drew closer, the features of his face became clearer and clearer until I recognized it was Pierre. "I've been waiting for you," he said, stepping into the water. He took hold of the canoe. "I came as soon as I could," I told him. It wasn't soon enough. We both laughed. He held his hand toward me, and I reached and reached and reached. I just couldn't. "Gabrielle!" Mama was crying. "My Gabrielle!" I turned slowly and smiled at her. "It's all right, Mama. I'm fine now." Slowly the world behind me began to shrink and darken. But when I turned back to my lover, there was only brightness and warmth. I was home, truly. I was home. Oh, this really got me choked up. This one was great. So I cannot wait to read the next series. And I also wanted to let you know that Andrew Neiderman is coming out with a biography of V.C. Andrews, and I'm very, very excited about this. I already pre-ordered it. It's coming out, I think, in February, and it's called The Woman Behind the Attic, the V.C. Andrews Story. This celebration of the woman who took us to the heights of a secluded attic and the depths of our own dark psyches, well, that's true, reveals an intimate portrait of the famously private V.C. Andrews. Best known for her internationally multi-million copy best-selling novel Flowers in the Attic, Cleo Virginia Andrews lived a fascinating life. Born to modest means, she came of age in the American South during the Great Depression and faced a series of increasingly challenging health issues. Yet, once she rose to international literary fame, she prided herself on her intense privacy. Now, the woman behind the attic aims to connect her personal life with the public novels for which she was famous. Based on Virginia's own letters and interviews with her dearest family members, her long-term ghostwriter, Andrew Neiderman, tells Virginia's full story for the first time. So I'm very, very excited for that to come out. I can't wait to read it, and let me know in the comments below if you plan to read that too. I would love to hear your thoughts about this series, the films if you watch them, and I'm hoping that there will be a Tarnish Gold film coming out. I'm not sure if it is, but I would love to see Naomi Judd do the part of Catherine Landry, because that would be a great role for her. So that's all I have for today. Thanks so much for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye!